Hello folks, little video blog here on Chi, or what the Japanese call Ki, Chi being the original word in Chinese, and martial arts, and how they relate to the development of yourself as a person. Okay, so this basically came about because of a few things coming together in a short period. Last month, I came out with a Kindle book of my translation of an Edo period book on swordsmanships and martial arts and Ki, called the Tengu's Essay on the Arts. Excuse me. So when you translate something like that, you really go word for word. You don't skim something. You really have to get into it. So I was really deep into the subject as the book talked about developing Ki and getting Ki in martial arts, and how Ki can be limited to one area if you're not careful, but how Ki is kind of universal, but it separates and it comes back together, and how the Ki of one area can be used in the Ki of other areas if you're skillful enough, as the book details, and things like that. So, for the last few weeks, I've had Ki in the back of my mind. When last week, or this week, a guy from the past kind of appeared on my radar again. The guy's name is John Duvall, and years ago, he moved to Colorado Springs, where I lived, and he got on the same message board that I was, and immediately started preaching to the masses about his style of ninjutsu he started, called Kumori-ryu. He started at the age of 24. Needless to say, it didn't go well for him, and he essentially got laughed off the board, because people were asking, well, what's your qualifications for being a ninja master, starting your own style? And I kept an eye on him for a while because he's kind of twitchy. He's the type of person that you would not be surprised to read that they found his mother's body in his attic. Somebody pointed out to me that he acts exactly like someone on meth would, meth head. He's just, something's not quite right about that guy. So I kept an eye on him for a while after he left, just in case. And, not too long after he got laughed off, he was posting on Facebook about how his wife had basically locked him out of her life. He couldn't see his kids anymore, all this. And of course, I didn't have the details, but it seemed to be a big implosion in his life. He blamed her for everything, of course. And not too long after that, he moved back east and I stopped watching him. But this week he showed up in a group I'm a part of called We Love Bunjikan. And it's about Bunjikan. Bunjikan is an organization in Japan that I'm a part of that teaches martial arts. And, he came on again, same thing, like, here is, let me share you with what I know about ninjutsu. And of course I stood up and basically said, well, A, why are you qualified to talk about ninjutsu at all? And B, this is a group about Bunjikan. We want to talk about Bunjikan here, not just something that someone else makes up. And he got snarky, and all things considered, he didn't last too long. Got tossed from that group. And he followed me to another group that I happen to be administrator of. And since I'm an administrator, I had a bit more control of the conversation, and I basically was able to manipulate him and force him into giving straight answers to the answers that people were having about why he felt he was qualified to start his own style of ninjutsu. He started at age 24. He's 36 now. And just to let you know, he still sucks. I mean, I have got a student who has a condition very close to MS who still moves better than he does. So people, ask, what is your qualification? Why should someone study this style of ninjutsu from you that you found it? And I want to point out that when he started this style, you look on his webpage, this is the rank structure, and it goes all the way up to 5th dan that he could grant somebody. And people were asking. And at first he tried to say, oh, I've studied this, and I've studied that, and I've studied that. I was able to, force him into giving an answer of like, well, how long did you study that? What kind of rank did you get in this? And it turns out that, this he studied for like 3 months. That he got a yellow belt in. That over there he had a video course in. He never got up to even the first level of black belt before he started his own style of ninjutsu. And I remind you that he had a rank structure that he could give out fifth dans in his system. And people were saying, well, that's not enough. You got to get up to at least instructor level in one art before you can even consider starting your own. And he was arguing back and forth, saying, well, I've got a wider range. I've got years of experience. Like I studied here and then I studied on my own before I studied here. So I've got years of experience. Why shouldn't I be able to start my own art? And I've kind of stayed back for the most part in that respect, trying to put things into words. And, some things I could kind of point out to him if I wanted to about how, like, when you start an art, they expect you to be confused and kind of flail around. It's only later on that things get harder and they get more demanding and they push your nose deeper into your mistakes. And it can be extremely frustrating. I mean, there were times in Japan when I literally had my teeth grinding on the way back from class because it was so frustrating trying to just get through this wall, this barrier, and they're pushing me and making me go through this, hell of being able to not just be good enough, but to be the best that I can. And if you don't go through that before you ever start the style, then you're just going to stay at that level. I mean, they're going to, you start out, say in karate, and you flail around, then you go over to jujitsu, and they're expecting you to flail around, so they're not going to come around and make you a good martial artist in any respect, because they don't expect it from someone that's only been in the dojo for only 3 months. But there was something else, something else that he lacked, and that is part of martial arts that makes it so important that you get to at least instructor level before you start considering anything like that. And I realized the word that I was looking for was ki, the Japanese word ki. And I think I should stop for a second and explain what ki is and what ki is not. Okay, so ki is not, despite what you see in Dragon Ball Z or whatever, it's not an energy field that you use in martial arts, the whole shangwa or whatever. You don't learn ki in martial arts in order to send out a blast of flame to toss someone through a window. You go to Chipotle for that. Instead, as detailed in the essay, the Tengu's essay on the arts, ki is more along the lines of your ability, this thing that you can't put your finger on. It's not superpowers. You wouldn't become Batman learning what the Tengu's essay teaches. It's more like you would learn to be Batman, who is the full potential of what a human being could be. And to be honest, if you think about it, whenever Clark and Bruce went at it, Kal-El ended up as Bruce's little bitch. So yeah, ki is basically structured down. It's when I can see what's happening, I can't tell you how it's happening. When A happens, B follows, but I can't show you the connection of why that is. It's a bit of a mystery, and there's more than one way of things being a mystery in the world. Sure, yes, you've got acupuncture, but there's also other things that they use the term ki in. Let's look at the character, okay? Now, I'm never going to be a good calligrapher, but this is my understanding of what ki means, or excuse me, the character ki means. This right here, this is rice, and I am told that this thing here is a lid. Now, it doesn't appear in Japanese on its own, maybe in Chinese. I'm just going by it. It's called a particle in Japanese kanji. So this is basically rice with a lid on it. And from what I've been told, the origin of it was that back when they were developing the Chinese written language, they would, of course, cook rice. They would put the rice and the water in the pot, and then they would put a lid on. And they would have to put rocks on top of the lid. Otherwise, if it was just a thin wooden lid, it started like this. And now, of course, we can explain that, when you heat objects, they tend to expand. So you heat the air in the pot and expands, and the water, of course, starts to turn to gas, and the gas, it takes up more space, than the water, so it has to escape. We know that now, but back when they were developing the Chinese written language, they didn't. They didn't know a lot of things that we can explain now. So that is essentially what qi comes down to, is that there's something going on, but hell if we can explain it. And there's many things that you can apply the term qi to. Again, I mentioned acupuncture. They talk about lines of qi. They put needles in certain areas along these lines, and it seems to be that certain things happen. They can't show you the lines. They can't take it up and hold in their hands or apply the scientific method of testing it. So it's qi of one sort. But that's not the only type of qi. In Japanese, tenki, heaven's qi, is the word for weather. They didn't know about pressure systems. They didn't know about cold fronts. But they did know that if the smoke from the fire went straight up, they were looking at one type of weather coming at them. And if it was staying close to the ground, another type. If they woke up in the morning and there was dew all over the grass, it was pretty safe to leave their umbrella at home. They couldn't explain why. We can now. But even back then, they could see that certain things happen. Emotions, again, hormones, that fight you had in the morning that's putting you on edge. You don't know why people do things. You can't see inside them, but you can see certain effects. So qi is a lot wider use than most people would think. They're thinking, fire bombs and, Vegeta and all that. Rather, it's something, yeah, you can see it, but no, you can't explain it. And there's different types of qi, okay? Even in martial arts. Let's say, a violin master. When you see a violin master pick up the violin, something happens. And if you know what to look for, especially, you can see it. I pick up a violin, you're not going to see it. Not going to happen. I studied Kyogen, which is a type of Japanese theater, comedic kind of. In Japan for a short while, they had a little seminar for foreigners to teach the culture to them. And I was fortunate enough, this was taught by the head of the time, the Nomura family. And if you know Kyogen, Nomura, big name. The father was a national living treasure. And he stopped by to give a talk to us. But it was taught by his son, who was the active member. And it wasn't even those two that I saw. It was one of the guys that were long-term no actors that were associated with these guys that I saw this one. And he was just talking at once. He's like da 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 da, and you can see that his personality is kind of like this bright light. Bright and cheery, blah blah blah. And then it's like, oh, I'm on, and he just turns and whoop, and it went from a bright sunny light to a green precise laser. You could talk about being in the zone. You could talk about being in presence. I would say that's key. And he just nailed his performance. And he just, and you see that in, it doesn't even have to be a traditional art. There are certain actors, they just walk across the stage and everyone goes, and you would say that's presence. Japanese would say that's key. So that's one type of key, presence, being able to do that. And of course, the better you are at something, the more that presence shows up. And it applies in other areas as well. There's a story about Miyamoto Musashi, the author of the Book of Five Rings, who he was staying with this one person, and this person, the Lord, I believe it was, said, I would like to see a demonstration of your art. Can we have a little friendly match? So the Lord brings up one of his guys, and Musashi takes a short and long boken wooden sword, and at that point they start the match, and Musashi just pushes this guy back across the room inch by inch. Neither one of them actually even brings up the sword to strike. It's just Musashi stepping forward, the other guy inching back until he was off on the side of the room and couldn't go back anymore. And they said that the written thing written by one of his students, describing this was yes, the master's ki was so strong that he pushed him back with his ki. And it's not really an energy field pushing him back. There's a whole lot going on that micro movements and little things that one person can pick up and the other person can pick up. So just realize, okay, I can't strike here, I can't strike there. And both people are actually pretty good because, if I went up against Musashi, I would not see that I was overwhelmed, and I would probably try to attack, and it would go badly for me. That ninja master guy would certainly be, beaten to a pulp. And it's not, and this is not just a fanciful tale told about Musashi, because Ellis Amdur, I hope I pronounced that right. I've only seen his name spelled. Ellis Amdur has this great story of two naginata masters, halberds, glaives, that did something similar in the 20th century, very well recorded. These women had been training in naginata for decades, and they squared off. And again, neither one of them even sent out a blow, but one of them walked the other across the room until it was off the mat, and boom, it was over as far as everyone's concerned. That's what they would call ki. Can you explain how it happened? Can you point out exactly all the little points? No. Okay. Maybe we can someday with a lot of little cameras and all that, because we're looking in micro expressions now and able to explain a lot of things like that. Maybe someday, but right now we can't explain something like that any more than someone in the 5th century could explain static electricity. Okay, explain correctly. So again, ki is this thing that is there, but you really can't put your finger on exactly what it is. And that's kind of, in terms of learning martial arts, that's what I was thinking about in terms of this ninja master. Because, when reading the Tengu's essay on the arts, they were talking about how, ki in one area, if you develop your strong ki in one area, then you go to another area, such as, you develop the ki of swordsmanship, and then you start to study, meditation and Zen. Yeah, then all of a sudden it's so much easier. But if you're not strong in one thing, then you really can't do it. And it's not assured that, if you don't take precautions, if you don't have the right attitude that they point out in the book, then the ki of this area will only be in this area, and it won't come over to this part. And the closer things are in terms of ki, because there's a universal ki, as I said, and it all separates out, it separates out, it separates out. So the closer the ki is, the easier to go in. So if you study, say, judo for 10, 15 years, and you walk into an Aikido dojo, Aikido and judo are very different, but still, the judo guy with 15 years under his belt is going to learn Aikido a lot faster than the person that just walks off the street with no experience at all in any martial arts, because there's the martial art of ki, or the ki of martial arts, excuse me. So if there's the thing, again, the Tengu's essay on the arts described that there's more than one way up the mountain, but you've got to get up that mountain to the top or up there before you can start pulling things up, and that ki is actually able to pull things up. And it's not just, here's a more perhaps understandable example. If someone starts in high school and freshman in guitar class and learns guitar for a year, then he stops studying, stops going to class, instead goes to violin class for a year. Again, repeat that with keyboard and whatever. Then it's not the same as if somebody took guitar for all 4 years of high school. When I went to school, it was 4 years. I might still be 4 years of high school guitar lessons, and then when he gets out of high school, he starts studying violin. Well, at that point, the violin is going to be so much easier to learn for a lot of things, but a part of it is because of the ki of music, and it's very different from a year of this and year of this. When the example I gave of just 1 year, at the end of it, you would be a 1 year student after 4 years, and you would not be a 4 year student of music. You would be a 1 year student, or the other way, 4 year student, and again, you're learning violin faster than if you started without any musical background. That's kind of the same thing that I was wanting to point out to this self-proclaimed ninja master, is that he's studied this for this, and he studied this for this, and he studied this for this long time. He never got up to any different level and developed the key of martial arts where he could start pulling up and applying it to other martial arts. And that's why he still basically is terrible. And I can't put it any more kindly than that. I mean, he's just bad, despite the time. So that's kind of a little lesson right there about, how you should maybe do things. Because again, the key of martial arts is one thing, but there's other keys in other parts of life. And if you've ever run across a master of anything, chances are they don't just excel in one thing. They're really good at one thing, but they're better than most at a whole lot of other things. Again, the Kyogen teacher that I'm talking about, I mean, the member of the Nomura family, I spoke the best Japanese of all the foreigners there, and we spoke a lot, and I got to kind of know him a little bit. He was busy. And I get the impression, okay, I can't play tennis. I don't think he can play tennis. And again, Kyogen is different from tennis. I still believe that because of his mastery of Kyogen, his developing that key of Kyogen, that if we got on a tennis court and started learning, then within a year he would be up here and I'd still be like right here. And it's not just, people that are centered and good at one thing, it could be a wide ranging thing. I mean, someone that's good at, sports might be a lot better at studying, starting their own business. There's a lot of reasons that you can point to. In my case, I studied Japanese until I could pass the highest level test that the Japanese government tests for. And whenever I apply myself to something difficult, I always kind of remembered, well, the amount of, round eyes, pale faces that can get to this point is extremely low, but I managed to do that. So I've got the confidence and I know I've got the ability, so I'm not daunted. So that might be one thing, but there's still that key that I'm talking about, the chi, the thing that I can't put my finger on, that, people that are good in one area and just get good at one area and the rest of their lives isn't all that terrible. Whereas, that guy that I'm talking about, the ninja master, he doesn't have much of a business, career, anything like that. I'd call him more of a sperm donor than anything close to a father. And that's the question. Are some people just born that way? Born so that they stick to something and they get good at it, but because of their nature, they're also good at other things? Or is it, is it a chicken egg type thing? And I think that type of thing can be, taught, can be put into a person. And I would remind people, I talked about violin. You probably remember some person back in high school, their parents made them study violin from before they even went to kindergarten, like age 5. They've been studying violin since age 5. You meet them 10 years later, they're still studying violin, but they're also on the valedictorian list. They're got a letter in sports, varsity letter in sports. Colleges are, trying to, get them to go to them. They're not in the in-crowd clique, but they have a good social life. You know what I'm talking about. These people that, they are a little bit more than, the typical high school students that you knew. And yeah, it probably has something to do with them being forced to study violin from a very early age and stick with it. And again, another chicken egg type situation. It wasn't their choice to take violin. They had parents that were pushing them and made them take violin. Is it the parents, having that type of parents, that makes them that type of person? And it might be, but I do, based on my own experience, again, this is not something that's very scientific. It's, we're still, the human potential is still something that we're studying. We're going to always be studying it. My experience in going through Fort Benning, infantry training and basic training there, they pushed me further than I could ever go. I ever thought I could go. And when I got out, all of a sudden, everything, a lot of other parts of my life. I used to coast through life until that first day when I was staring at the drill sergeant and about ready to lose control of my bowels. When I got back, and started, up education again, I did a lot better than I did before. I had better relationships. So I think that, the thing about basic training at Fort Benning is that they will not let you quit. They make it very difficult to fail, and they will push you further than you thought you could ever go before. And in that one area, all of a sudden, I went from, coasting through life to actually applying my life. And that's when I started learning Japanese and got to where I was. So I think, yes, if you take something that will frustrate the hell out of you, and you've got a teacher that will stand over you, point out your mistakes, and not let you get away with things, pushing you beyond what you thought you could do, then yes, that one thing, Jack Palance in City Speakers, that one thing will reap benefits in all parts of your life. And again, the Tengu essay talked a lot about how that might not be the case and how you can fall into the trap of just one area. We've all known people that, can do certain things, but they can only do that. But we probably all know people that are great at one thing and good at a whole lot of other things. And I believe that is a great potential right there to, if you go out and you get a decent, legitimate martial arts that will push you and wasn't started by somebody at age 24, and do this, stick with it, that all of a sudden other parts of your life are going to start, improving. And there's some studies in other areas that kind of back this up. They're talking about how somebody whose life is just boom, like drugs, no exercise, bad health and all that, and they just one habit. And they made sure they had this one habit, and when this woman came back, totally changed. And that one habit just had a domino effect about all parts of her life. So yes, I do think martial arts or anything like that, square dancing, whatever, as long as you can push yourself and go beyond your further limits, that if you do that, you will get better. And you can improve your children's life if you force them to do something and stick with it of that nature. Now, at this point, I kind of want to point out that, a lot of people are going to be watching this, and maybe there's parents looking at this, thinking of sending their kids to martial arts class in order to improve their lives. And I'm going to be quite blunt right here. I do not teach kids, so I can say this, but I would not really advise most people to send them to the typical martial arts studio for this type of thing. I would perhaps send them to something like gymnastics or maybe violin. And the reason for this is that, well, people got to pay the rent on the studios and put food on their table. So in that case, they've got to give what the people want and not what the people need. Now, I've got a friend named Sam. He's old school karate. Old school. And he teaches kids, and he's great with kids. But he doesn't make a living off of teaching. He's retired. And so he can basically push the kids, and if the parents' kids comes up and say, I think little Timmy is worthy of a black belt now, he can tell them, nope. And if they say, well, if you don't give him a black belt, I'm going somewhere else, he goes, bye. And he's not going to cut corners. He doesn't have to cut corners. But children's classes are like the cornerstone of professional, commercial martial arts studios. If they don't have kids, then they're just not going to be able to make it. And most parents, they come in, they say, I want to install discipline in my son. Please take him as a student. You're starting with a parent that is trying to outsource raising their kid. And the kid's only going to be at the class for a few hours a week. So you kind of see as compared to being around the parent, you kind of see the problem. So most martial arts dojos are basically daycare. In the summer, they even have, some places around here even have buses that will go around and pick up kids for a day camp all summer long while the parents go to work. And they can't risk the kid complaining and whining to their parents constantly. Oh, sensei won't give me, you told me that I was terrible and all that. And eventually wearing down the parents and pulling the kids out of the class. So yeah, you're not going to get that really in most dojos. If you can find someone like Sam, great. I really think that Sam is wonderful for kids. The kids that come out of his classes are so much better than when they went in. But a violin class, say, first of all, I've never really heard of a parent when the kids come home goes, go practice your kata. But I do know parents say, can watch and see their kids go off and practice the violin. And moreover, they can tell how good the kid is getting at the violin, even if you don't study violin yourself. Whereas, how are you going to make that judgment with martial arts? They're going to go to tournaments with, other studios that have the same work ethic, or they're going to get black belts at age 8. Those aren't worth much. So yeah, maybe, maybe not martial arts, but something for your kids that you don't let them drop. I was just listening to an audiobook by a host of American Ninja Warrior called Anyone Can Be a Ninja. I like the title. And he was an ex-NFL player that went into this. And he explained how his parents from Nigeria, he hated football. He wanted to drop out. And his father came and said, no, when you start something, you finish it. You do not give up. We do not give up in my family. And don't ask me to pronounce his name. And from that, he went on from high school, got a scholarship to college, went on to the NFL, and after the NFL, he went on to be a broadcast presence as celebrity in his own right. And that he credits in the audiobook straight out. If my father had let me drop out, I would not be where I am today. So something like that for your kids, and something like that for you. You've got the choice. Again, I happen to think martial arts, if you got a good instructor, is great because that's my choice. But, if you want to go out and study yoga, hey, yoga's great, or anything like that. The science is not settled. The science is we're just starting on this. But again, this whole concept of ki and how developing ki in one area can enrich your entire life is so exciting to me. So that's what I want to explain to everyone. That's what I want to encourage everyone to go out and find something that you can excel in, that you can push yourself in, that you can cry in frustration until you get over something. And that will make your life better. Or so I hope. Thanks. Subscribe if you want. I don't put out too much, but if you want to subscribe, fine. If not, I don't care.